Hello, everybody, and today a very funny story and a very beautiful story called The Brave Potter. And this is a very famous folk tale from India, written by Marguerite Siek to the whole world. So he selected many folk tales from India, and this is very famous story in the land of Andhra Pradesh. And this was a Telugu folk tale which he has beautifully rewritten in English. And you can take out the page number 66. This is to see the brave potter. So let's start the lesson. So Margaret Seek has chosen a very well-known Indian folk tale for retelling in English. Children and adults alike are fond of folk tales, which are often amusing and sometimes instructive. Now the story starts. It was dark. Thick black clouds covered the evening sky. The thunder roared, and the strong wind shook the branches and leaves of the trees in the forest. Pit, pit, pat, pit, pat. Drops of rain fell. Then the lightning flashed and split the black sky with its blinding light. With its blinding light. Blinding is very, very sharp light. Soon it was raining heavily. So that was a beautiful description. An old tiger ran through the rain looking for shelter. So an old tiger ran through the rain looking for shelter. He was wet and cold, and his cave was far away. While hurrying to his shelter, he saw an old hut. With a sigh of relief, with a sigh, like that, with a sigh of relief, the tiger crawled, crawled under the thatched roof. Thatched, thatched, with the thatched roof, and laid down by the door. Except for the sound of the rain, all was quiet. So it was raining and all was quiet. Before he could nod off here means sleep off. Before he could nod off, however, he heard something heavy being dragged inside the hut. Something heavy was being dragged inside the hut. This was followed by the voice of a woman. So there was a clear voice of a woman, and she was saying, "Oh, how terrible this leak is! How terrible this leak is!" She complained, "How terrible! I would rather meet a tiger in the forest than have this leak in my house." So that's what she said. A leak? And the tiger didn't know the meaning of leak. A leak, the tiger thought. What is a leak? It must be very dangerous and strong, or the woman would not be more frightened of the leak than of me. Am I not rightly called the king of the forest? Aren't they all afraid of me? I wonder what a leak looks like. So the tiger got very frightened of the leak because he didn't know the meaning of the word leak. Soon afterwards, the tiger was very tired. Soon afterwards, the tired tiger fell asleep. He was suddenly awakened by an angry voice shouting in his ear. He felt heavy blows fall upon his head and shoulders. So somebody was beating him. He felt heavy blows fall upon his head and shoulders. "You horrible beast!" a voice screamed angrily. "How dare you run away? How dare you make me walk about in the middle of the night trying to find you? Be careful. One of these days I will kill you. Now, go home." The old tiger shivered. This must be the leak. He had heard about the word leak and he thought it was something very dangerous. This must be the leak who has come out of the hut. I'd better do as he says or he will kill me. The tiger got frightened and he decided to do whatever that voice was telling. So the tiger allowed himself to be bound around the neck with a thick rope. So whoever that was, he tied the tiger's neck with a thick rope. The mysterious creature, the creature who had shouted at him, the mysterious creature climbed onto the tiger's back and pulled at the rope. "Come on, head for home," shouted the voice. The tiger felt a sharp kick on his side. Kick on his side. The tiger was terrified. The tiger was terrified. What's happening? Who is this leak? He thought it was the leak. The tiger was terrified and he ran through the dark forest. The creature pulled hard on the rope to tell him which way to go. At the same time, it scolded, cursed. Cursed means give all the worst words, the most negative words, and kicked the poor tiger. Soon, they stopped in front of a small hut on the edge of the thick forest. The creature climbed down from the tiger's back and bound him with an iron chain to a nearby tree. Then he went inside the hut. The tiger could not free himself from the chain, so he had to spend a miserable night. Miserable, M-I-S-E-R-A-B-L-E, miserable, very horrible, very wretched, miserable night under the tree. Who was this creature who was able to capture such a large and dangerous tiger? Now, who is that man? Now the author goes into a flashback. Flashback. Who was this creature who was able to capture such a large and dangerous tiger? Let's find out. So now we go to the flashback. On the afternoon of that day, this was night, but flashback. On the afternoon of that day, a potter, P-O-T-T-E-R, a potter, person who makes pots, a potter had arrived home after a hard day's work. He was tired and thirsty. He had asked his wife for some palm wine. Palm wine is a special kind of drink which you make from the palm tree. The more he drank, the better he felt. When he had drunk all the wine, he no longer felt tired. When the storm began, the potter suddenly remembered that he had left his donkey tied under a tree. He rushed out of his hut to take the animal into the stable, S-T-A-B-L-E, where you keep all the animals. That place is called stable. You can imagine his anger when he discovered that the donkey was not there anymore. The only thing left was its chain. "My stupid donkey must have run off into the forest," he grumbled. "When I catch him, I'll give him a good beating." The potter walked through the wet forest. Oh, this is flashback. When it became dark, he often stumbled over roots and fallen branches. With each step, the potter felt angrier and angrier with his donkey. "When I catch him, I will tie him up under the tree all night," he muttered to himself. Hours later, the potter reached the old woman's hut. Remember where the tiger was there? There he saw an animal sleeping in front of the door. "There he is," he shouted. "There he is, the stupid animal." The drunken potter did not notice the difference between that donkey and the tiger. He was very drunk and he was very angry. He had lost his mind. He kicked and pecked the sleeping tiger. He then jumped onto the frightened animal's back, rode it home, and then tied it up with the iron chain. Next morning, the villagers who passed the potter's house looked in amazement. Amazement means absolutely stunned. What is happening? Amazement at the tiger tied to the tree. Soon the news spread throughout the village that the potter had caught a tiger and tied it to a tree in his yard. All the villagers praised his courage. They also thanked him because the tiger had eaten many of their goats and buffaloes. So the villagers were very happy with the brave tiger. They had tried to catch him for many years. They had tried to catch the tiger for many years but had failed. Of course, the potter said that he had done nothing of the sort. And the potter was surprised. He said, "I have done nothing of the sort." He said that he had only brought his donkey home. He did not understand how a donkey could change into a tiger. When he saw the tiger, he fainted. When he finally saw the tiger, he himself had tied it to the tree, he fainted. Nobody, however, believed the potter's story. Nobody believed it. The villagers even praised him for being modest. M-O-D-E-S-T, modest, which means very humble. Soon, the potter became famous. So obviously, man who brings a tiger, ties it up with an iron chain to a tree, obviously he became famous all over the land. Everybody who met him called him the brave potter. The simple potter himself never understood why. A few years later, war broke out between the potter's country and a much stronger neighbor. The king immediately gathered a large army, but he realized that it was not a strong enough army to save his country from defeat. He needed a hero to lead, to be in the front, his army. Where could he find such a brave man? The king hurriedly called his ministers together and asked their advice. One of the ministers remembered the story of the brave potter. "Your Majesty," the minister said, "I know someone who can lead our army." The king immediately sent a messenger to the potter's house. When the potter realized that he had been made general of the army, he became frightened. The king had ordered him to go to the palace the next day. How could he, a poor, ignorant potter, become the general of the army? He had never carried a sword, nor had he ever ridden a horse. "Oh, I shall die because of that stupid donkey," groaned the potter to his wife. "He has only brought us trouble." The next day, he went with his wife to the capital. The king was pleased to see him and ordered the potter to lead the army into battle the next day. The enemy were not far from the gates of the city. A splendid house had been prepared for the potter and his wife. The horse which would carry him into battle was ready in the stable. So there was a horse, nice horse. That night, the potter could not sleep. He was nervous and worried because he did not know how to ride a horse. "If I fall off, everybody will laugh at me," he thought. "I will get up very early tomorrow and practice riding the horse." At dawn, the potter woke up his wife and they went to the stable. They saw the beautiful black horse ready for its new master. "Oh, how tall he is! I shall never be able to climb onto his back," sighed the potter. Sighed, S-I-G-H-E-D. "Put this bench beside him," said his wife, "and use it as a step." Even with the help of the bench, the potter had much difficulty climbing onto the horse's back. When he was finally seated, he found that the saddle, the side thing which you keep to sit properly, was very slippery. "Please tie my feet to the stirrups," S-T-I-R-R-U-P-S, "stirrups, dear wife," said the potter. "Otherwise, I shall certainly fall off." "Please tie my feet to the stirrups." "Right, dear wife," said the potter. "Otherwise, I shall certainly fall off." His wife found some rope and bound her husband's feet tightly to the stirrups. She then passed the rope underneath the horse. See what she did? Underneath the horse and tied the two stirrups together. So he became, very fixed onto the horse like that. She also passed a length of rope around the potter's waist and tied him to the saddle. So now he was completely fixed to the horse like this. Almost like a, wooden thing tied up and fixed to it. "Now please tie my hands to his neck." "Please tie my hands to his neck," said the potter. Meanwhile, so she tied his hands also around his neck. of the horse, said the potter. Meanwhile, the big black horse was impatiently, he was not patient, horse, he wanted to move. Impatiently, he was impatiently pawing, pawing is doing like this. His hooves onto the ground. Hooves are the end of the horse's legs. Hooves on the ground. When the potter's wife tried to pass another rope around its neck, around the neck of the horse suddenly jumped free. It galloped. Galloped is galloped, moved fast. It galloped, Galloped, galloped out of the stable with the potter hanging like a sack of rice on its back. Sack of rice on its back. Only the ropes kept him from crashing to the ground. He would have fallen. But the ropes, the way his wife had tied him, was so perfect, he didn't fall off. The potter held tightly to the horse's neck and prayed to all the gods to save his life. After galloping through the quiet streets, the horse crashed through the city gates. It moved the city gates and raced across the open fields. Now the horse was galloping on the open fields. It leapt, L-E-A-P-T, jumped like that, leapt over fences and streams and began to head for. Head for means go towards. Head for, H-E-A-D-F-O-R, head for the enemy's camp. When the potter realized where they were going, he tried harder than ever to stop the horse. He tried harder. Please stop. He pulled wildly on the reins, R-E-I-N-S, reins, the ropes which is tied to the neck of a horse. But it was of no use. The horse galloped on, G-A-L-L-O-P-E-D, galloped, running on. When they passed a young tree, the potter grabbed the branch. This is tree-like thing. The potter grabbed a branch, but the horse did not stop. Instead, the tree was pulled out of the ground. So he almost uprooted a tree. A sentry, S-E-N-T-R-Y. Sentry is a security guard outside this, like a soldier. From the enemy camp, saw the potter galloping towards the camp with a tree in one hand and his reins in the other. It was a very funny sight. That must be the general who captured a tiger with his bare hands. They also had heard of him, the brave potter. That must be the general who captured a tiger with his bare hands, he thought. Now he has uprooted a tree. Uprooted, which means take it out of the roots. Uprooted a tree with only one hand. He is not an ordinary man. He is a giant. Run, run, save yourselves. The famous tiger general is coming at the head of a large army to attack us. He has the strength of a giant. He has uprooted a tree with one hand. That sentry shouted all these dialogues. The frightened soldiers fled. F-L-E-D, fled means ran away. The frightened soldiers fled. Their king was left by himself in his tent. Hurriedly, very quickly, he wrote a letter begging for peace and apologizing for attacking the country. Now he was too frightened. He didn't want to take any risks. He left this letter in the tent. Then he jumped on his horse and followed his soldiers. The king also followed the soldiers. When the potter's black horse reached the deserted camp, deserted means nobody is there. It's like a desert. D-E-S-E-R-T-E-D. Deserted camp, it stopped. Now finally the horse stopped. With shaking hands, the potter untied, which means untied, removed his feet and fell to the ground. When he untied his feet, he fell to the ground. When he looked around, he was surprised to find the camp empty. He looked in the king's tent and found the letter. The puzzled potter, he didn't know what had happened, walked back to the city with the letter in his pocket. He went to his wife and gave her the letter. Dear wife, he said, never in my life will I ride a horse again. Please take this letter to our king and tell him that the enemy has run away. I am going to bed. His wife ran towards the palace with the letter. When the king read the letter, he was full of praise for his new general. He asked the potter's wife where her husband was. My husband is tired, your majesty, The servants have put him to bed, answered the wife respectfully. Let him rest today. Tell him to come tomorrow to receive his reward, the king said. Next morning, the potter went to the king's palace. He left the black horse in the stable and walked to the palace with his wife. He could not ride it, he walked to the palace. The streets were filled with cheering crowds. Cheering in the stadium when people play cricket, everybody's cheering. The crowds were all cheering, yay, yay, and all that. They had all heard about his brave action. Look how humble he is, they said to each other. They saw the simple potter and they said how humble he is, how simple he is. Any other man would ride in the palace on a horse, but he is walking like an ordinary man. He is truly a humble and brave man. The king rewarded the potter so well that he did not need to work again. So if because of these two crazy incidents, the potter never had to work again. The country was peaceful for the rest of his life, and the potter never rode a horse again. He was so frightened, he never rode a horse again. So obviously, what a lovely story. And how beautifully the author, Marguerite Siek, has narrated the story. How well he has written it. This is a wonderful piece of very beautiful writing and such a funny story. One potter, because of two accidents, becomes so famous and so great. So life is like that. Sometimes it's very funny, it's very ironical. Sometimes in life, so many people become so successful, but many a times it happens because of accident. And it's a very funny world we live in. It's a very humorous story. I hope you enjoyed the story. This was a presentation of NRK Academy.